Hello and welcome to this Serial Geek TV episode commentary for Shredder and Splintered, an episode of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles produced by MWS. I have to say the title for this episode is a bizarre one. Shredder and Splintered is a strange title. It doesn't really work grammatically, and I've seen it on official releases listed as the following. Shredded and Splintered makes sense. The Shredder is splintered makes sense. And Shredder gets splintered. That also makes sense. There are probably even more as well. I feel that The Shredder is Splintered is a much better title than Shredder and Splintered. But we'll go for the official title for now. Begrudgingly. And I promise on this commentary I'll try not to mention Hero Turtles as much. Well, as I mentioned before, this episode never aired on terrestrial TV in the UK as the first 5 episodes were skipped. So the first episode we saw in the UK was Return of the Shredder. The reason I wanted to tackle this episode is because visually it's a great looking episode animated by a Japanese studio, Toei Doga. I'll talk about them more in this commentary, I'm sure, but I wanted to also comment on this episode as it really was, as weird as this sounds, the end of an era. What era could you be speaking of, I hear you ask? Well, the first 5 episodes, written by the late great David Wise, feel a lot more raw, less humour based and less wacky than the show would become. Of course there would still be many great episodes throughout the series, but the first 5 episodes remind me a lot of the comic book roots of the show.
What a bunch of airheads, man!
That should have been my story!
You're gonna get your story, April. Now!
I think Toei's animation, which has a beautifully heavily rendered look in the first 5, especially in this episode, create a real sense of grittiness. The colour palette of the Turtles doesn't brightly leap off the screen as it does with Season 2. And if you look at the way the Turtles were illustrated here, heck, all the characters, even the look of the backgrounds. When the first episode of Season 2 airs, Return of the Shredder, it's such a striking difference with the much friendlier visuals, which I think is a very conscious decision. The turtle shapes are more awkward in the first 5 episodes, but become very rounded and brighter and approachable in Season 2.
Oh, April, take the turtle van. We'll use that vehicle the neutrinos left behind.
I'm on it!
Ironically, after what I just said, this image of the 4 turtles was one of the most used in publicity shots, even though it really didn't reflect what we saw past Season 1. The detail on the Shredder is so cool. Also, we get to see a mutant that never really came to be here, one of the gang that Bebop and Rocksteady were a part of. Did this guy have a name, I wonder? Every time I hear the word mutagen, I always think of that awesome slime that came with the Ninja Turtles toy line, reminiscent of the slime that came in tubs for the real Ghostbusters toy line. But yeah, going back to the mutant. Yeah, he was clearly a bat creature of some sort. I love the Shredder taunting the Turtles.
If you want it, come get it.
You bet we will!
So good. Notice throughout this episode how the Turtles are often illustrated and how effortlessly they can look angry, looking a lot like the illustrations found in the original black and white comic. It's really funny to think how the go-to expression as the series went on would be a wider face with a near constant smile, which carried through to the advertising, obviously. And we're back inside the Technodrome, and look at Rocksteady here. His design would actually change in Season 2 with him losing his helmet, which I really feel added a bit more threat to his design. I guess it completed the army rhino look. Not that those goggles would have properly fitted him. In a few moments we're going to see a great scene. If you know this episode, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I love the Turtles complaining here. Listen, especially Rob Paulson as Raphael.
Oh, what now, man? Who bought this gelato? Piece of junk.
I love that. Piece of junk. And the way the music slows down too. Brilliant. There's just something about each of these shots, the 4 of them around the neutrino vehicle. They have such presence. They look like little powerful mutant turtles, which is what they're supposed to look like. Whereas as the series went on, they really did lose this look. Okay, we're about to get a beautifully animated, wonderfully staged, action-packed fight scene here. It's animated like an action scene, but the moments of comedy never take you out of it, and that is a very hard trick to pull off. The way this action scene kicks off with the mutants grabbing all 4 characters by the neck, I'm not quite sure that physical action would have flown by the 4th season of this show. And yeah, Toei just put a great deal of energy and emotion into this fight scene. The scene really does present Bebop and Rocksteady as a true force to be reckoned with. They're powerful mutants that dwarf the Turtles in size and can subdue them relatively easily. But this sequence is so perfect. Rocksteady firing bullets from his gun, not laser blast, because we can see the cartridges and hear the impact of the bullets against the wall. Rocksteady is written in this scene as someone that loves violence, blasting away in every direction. It's done so well. His line here is fantastic.
Drink blazing electric death, Turtles.
Drink blazing electric death, Tweedles. As the car heads towards the Turtles, watch how they're animated. Leonardo does a comedy take and darts off, and the boing of the hood. That's brilliant. But go back, the way the car is animated to crash land, the amount of detail, it's gorgeous. And this shot of Rocksteady with the traffic light eyes. Actually, back in 2001, when I attempted to become an animator in the UK animation industry, I utterly swiped that gag with the traffic light falling on a villain's head, though I didn't give them the traffic light eyes. Maybe I'll upload my god-awful showreel on this channel one day. Anyway, we get a sense with the Turtles' conversation here that the mutants really are too much for them. The situation we've just witnessed presents to us that in hand-to-hand combat with the two oversized mutants, they're not going to win, which is strange when you head to an episode in Season 3, Beneath These Streets. Leonardo and Rocksteady square off. Leonardo swipes his sword and Rocksteady's pants fall down. It's how the mighty mutants would fall. And if you've ever heard me talk about the episode Turtles on Trial, which I'm sure you have, it feels like a Season 1 episode with the villains posing a physical threat against the Turtles. It's not really a hugely comic episode. Okay, Michelangelo does don a suit of armour to fight Shredder briefly, but aside from that, look at this beautifully painted shot of the Technodrome. It's absolutely gorgeous. This scene between Krang and Shredder is superb, borrowing heavily from Frankenstein with the awakening of Frankenstein's monster, but the music here, as well as Krang's desperation, is wonderful. I mentioned it in my previous Turtles commentary, but the way Krang is illustrated here, so much better than a majority of the series. He's detailed and gross, which he's supposed to be. Krang hitting his head is a brilliant little touch. I guarantee that is from Toei Doga. It's an animation gag that I can imagine wasn't in the script because it would have been the focus of the animation. They would have had a close-up or something. Now there's one shot here that creeps me out as Krang gets excited. Oh, look at that. I can't stand that shot. It's really weird. I mentioned that Krang is gross. We even see Shredder putting on gloves to pick up Krang here. I love the nice detail that his blades, of course, pierce his gloves. All the juice emanating from Krang. They never made him this gross in the series, ever again. And again, definitely a touch from Toei Doga to have Shredder put the tentacle in after placing him inside the body. Here we see the Frankenstein's monster scene. It's alive. Oddly, or not so oddly, these effects remind me of the type we'd see in the Toei animated episodes of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. There's quite a lot going on with the effects of that previous scene. You have the cell animation, the effects cells on top of the existing cells, camera exposures, and what appears to be coloured film placed across the lens in order to create the light warping. Turtle alert. I love that. Turtle alert, turtle alert. So yeah, Shredder sends out his forces, and we end Act 1 with the Turtles up a rope without a... No, that doesn't work.
Oh, just what we needed. Kill crazed foot soldier bikers.
And back from the act break. Things are about to be taken up a notch or two, with some rather exquisite action scenes featuring our favourite foursome. Even though they were often trashed, the Foot felt like a real threat in the first 5 episodes, a true force in these early episodes. Granted, they were robots, which meant that you could have at them, but yeah, there's something really quite threatening about them. They don't just feel useless as they do throughout the series. Much like the first episode of this mini-series, here we see the Turtles happily battering their foes with their weapons. Just wait, Michelangelo, in Season 4 you get to use a grappling hook as a weapon because censorship sucks. This feels like one of those rare moments when raw sewage is acknowledged in the series. Bear in mind, when the Turtles are in the sewers walking around in the water, that ain't water. It never is. Methinks that's the colour of sewage too. Well, I did say that the first 5 episodes felt raw. I wasn't actually thinking of raw sewage. Oh, that's grim. Probably best we don't ever think about that. In this next scene, this has got to be Burton Thompson on the phone to Tiffany, his young love interest whom we see in Return of the Shredder. Listen.
So what do you say? Tonight, a little dinner, a little dancing. I'll call you back. What are you doing here, April?
I'm trying to get a story for you.
Love the direction here as Burton talks with the camera cutting closer and closer until diddly squat. Again, the characters were illustrated far more detailed. I always preferred April's really big hair in these first 5 episodes. The artists at Toei were intently looking at Peter Chung's designs. Oh, speaking of which, Peter Chung! I can talk about him. So the first time I remember hearing Peter Chung's name was on the MTV Liquid television shorts that aired over here in the UK on BBC Two. He created these beautifully violent shorts of a character named Aeon Flux. Even though I was a big fan of animation at the time, I won't profess to knowing all the ins and outs of the industry at the time. Surely a violent MTV cartoon had no connection to anything from the 80s, right? The next time I remember seeing Peter Chung's name was in the end credits of Transformers the movie, and I remember thinking, the Aeon Flux guy worked on Transformers the movie. And then I started to think, what else did he work on, I wonder? Yes, Transformers the series, his name pops up the credits there, okay. And then I saw his name on Ninja Turtles, and I recall thinking that one particular character was definitely designed by him. The guy interviewed by April in the very first episode of the series, the one voiced by Rob Paulson, who lists the equipment stolen by the Foot Clan and then says, I have absolutely no idea. He reminded me of the somewhat ugly, crazy head characters that you would see in the Aeon Flux show. So when I worked on the Time Life DVD box set of The Real Ghostbusters, I was flown out to Los Angeles and met many of those that worked on the cartoon. I remember talking to Dan Reba and Kevin Altieri about Peter Chung. They had all worked together at Geek in the 1980s, and both of them were saying that he was a fantastic animator that would always try and insert gorgeous pieces of animation into the Cops cartoon, even though that particular cartoon featured some of the poorest animation ever seen in a cartoon of the 1980s. When they told me that, I began to think, did Peter Chung animate the introduction sequence to Cops? The use of angles in that opening is very similar to what we see in Aeon Flux. More so, did he animate the introduction sequence to Ninja Turtles 2? Again, Peter Chung's visual style is so unique, as are his angles. Also, Ninja Turtles and Cops have great transitions during their introductions. One has the Shredder tearing through the screen, Cops has Dr. Bad Vibes crashing through the screen. Another thing I clocked, because it's hard to ignore, was that the Rugrats cartoon, a cartoon I rarely ever saw, had an introduction animated and timed like Peter Chung had worked on it. There's just something very, dare I say, weird about his style of direction, and to me it's instantly recognisable. But all that aside, I never really sought out any proof. Amazingly, last year in 2022, Peter Chung popped up on Instagram, and I immediately messaged him, and he actually replied. We spoke for a while and I asked him, did you direct the introduction to Ninja Turtles? He said yes. I said, did you direct the introduction to Cops? He said yes. He even posted the storyboards on his Instagram. Not only that, but he posted his character designs, and sure enough, the looks for all the characters in the miniseries, the designs, were by Peter Chung. He even designed Krang's android body, which we're going to see a lot of in the coming moments. He is one of those animators that doesn't really go around saying, guess what everyone, I worked on a bunch of 1980s cartoons, which is a shame because he really should. Finally we see the Shredder and Splinter confront one another. There are so many nice touches in these upcoming scenes, and this fight is brilliant and brutal at times, especially when Shredder draws a giant sword.
Are you there?
I am here, my lord. 12 brigades stand ready, lord, with more to come.
So yeah, take a look at Dimension X there. Very different to what we see at the beginning of Season 2. It's almost like a weird orange limbo with no sense of gravity. It's a beautiful look.
Not so fast, Baldy!
I love this scene with Krang getting bigger and bigger and the Turtles fleeing for their lives. Look at that, Krang presses the button too, it's so good. Such little attention to detail. The Turtles' expression. And this side shot is brilliant, the way Krang's just slowly charging after them. It's a great moment. This is so good. I would argue how come Krang himself grows inside of the android body, but cartoon logic, it's fine.
The Wrath of Krang! Wasn't that the name of a movie?
Nice Star Trek II Wrath of Khan reference there. Look at the way in which Toei Doga animate Krang from this point on. Like a proper monster with slow and heavy movements, but still utterly threatening and downright terrifying. We don't see Krang as anything else but a threat here. It's nice that in this shot, going forward, they give Krang a much deeper voice, so he's more imposing, although I still would have preferred him to have that whiny voice. A giant-sized Krang going on the rampage in New York. Yes, please. Goodness, I forgot how much I love this episode. It's quality from top to bottom. Look at the animation of the balloon inflating. Such detail. You have to forget about logic in the creation of this here turtle blimp, in the sense that Donatello creates this turtle-themed balloon from materials left lying around at Baxter Stockman's laboratory. Does that mean Baxter just happened to have a giant balloon with a turtle pattern on it? The fighting here is so good. There's no let-up. It's not comedy-based. It's two people trying to injure the other. And given that Shredder's got a sword, methinks he's trying to kill Splinter. Yeah, really cool. Also, it's kind of bizarre when you take a step back here. Shredder is written like a villain. No humour or anything in these first 5 episodes. Much like Skeletor in his earliest appearances. As I've mentioned before, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a show that progressively became wackier with each season, much to the show's detriment, I feel. Again, another definite Toei Doga touch there. Leonardo climbing the ladder and loses his grasp briefly. These touches just make things a tad more real. I'm talking about things being real in a cartoon with a bunch of Ninja Turtles in a blimp attacking a brain in the stomach of an android. Again, as I mentioned, look at the way in which Krang's android body is animated. Great weight to it, no quick or really sudden movements. In that previous shot, I think Krang was oddly miscoloured, reminded me of his very pink appearance in the final episode of Season 2, Return of the Technodrome. Even that shot there, go back and look at the detail, the animation and the final poses of the Channel 6 news team leaping into action. It's so impressive. You never get anything this dynamic looking for the Channel 6 news team in the actual series. That shot was great. It was almost like they were ready for battle. This scene always makes me chuckle, with Michelangelo and Raphael attempting to jointly pilot this aircraft with absolutely no prior experience.
Hey, I'm starting to get the hang of this.
Now let's eradicate that creep, man. Oops.
Interesting being inside Krang here. Not as detailed as Unicron's innards in Transformers the movie, but still very cool to see. I especially love the detail of the cogs and stuff moving around. Very smooth animation. I love how quickly Leonardo leaps into action here. Just starts chopping away. Yeah, watch this sequence here. This is great. Shredder's sword cuts through Master Splinter's walking stick. He breaks the stick in. Oh, that's so good. Just tosses it away.
Now, Turtles, you're finished.
Krang looks so evil there. It's brilliant. This animation of Donatello, watch this. It's just so... This camera pan is fantastic. Bam! Straight through. And the staging throughout this sequence is glorious. There's not a single wasted shot. Everything is timed perfectly. So yeah, I promised I wouldn't talk about Hero Turtles, but I just need to bring up one more thing. As you've heard me talk about on this channel, the first 5 episodes didn't air on terrestrial TV in the UK. However, as the Ninja Turtles became a phenomenon, Sky Movies, a channel on satellite and cable TV in the UK, would air The Epic Begins, which was a movie comprised of 4 of the first 5 episodes released to VHS by Family Home Entertainment in the United States. When Sky Movies aired The Epic Begins, they bizarrely retained the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles title and theme song. However, they did edit around the scenes featuring nunchucks. It was, at the time, the only way you could see the opening episodes, -1, and, as I mentioned, with much censorship in place. I remember the way in which they edited the introduction sequence. Due to removing scenes rather than replacing them, they had to cut the song short, so we had Splinter taught them to be ninja teens, and then it cut straight to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So we weren't musically introduced to the Turtles. It was very odd. So if you go back and look at those shots of Splinter imprisoned in the energy-based cage, listen to the sound effects used, and you can make out the classic outer space sound used when Cybertron is shown in the Transformers cartoon. It's very, very cool. There's an absolutely classic line coming up, which you should all hopefully remember from the utterly awesome arcade game.
Tonight I dine on turtle soup.
My goodness, the amount of money I put in that arcade. And here's Splinter to the rescue. Bam! No. One thing I really like about the first 5 episodes is it really does establish Shredder as a classically trained ninja, and also a master strategist and highly accomplished scientist and creator. I mean, unless I missed something, he created Krang's android body, right? Actually, thinking out loud, I wonder if any episodes actually delve into how Shredder and Krang met. How did this evil alliance begin? Turtles fans, let me know. But the battle isn't over yet. Now the Turtles are going to the Technodrome, because they've got to put an end to this menace, at least for the first season, because they'll be back time and time again. Thinking about it, how do the Turtles sneak into the Technodrome this time around? Earlier in the episode we had Turtle Alert, Turtle Alert. Here come the rock soldiers. Oh, look at that sequence with Raphael and Shredder fighting. Raphael gives him a good kick. Honestly, after this commentary, I'm going to go back and watch this episode again. We get a really interesting use of squash and stretch animation here with the very fabric of the Technodrome warping and bending as the mighty fortress folds in on itself. Although how the turtles get out of that, I've no idea. But they do, just in time. Whew! Leonardo's expression, fantastic. And so the turtles have won the day. And even here when they talk about the fact that Splinter may forever be in the form of a rat, it's not a bittersweet scene, it all just feels right and leaves us with a smile on our faces. Oh, I absolutely love this shot of Splinter standing alongside his 4 students and walking off with them. It looks like a real family moment. I highly doubt we see anything that touching in the series. Even the cynical Raphael is moved to agree. This is an interesting little scene. Listen to Shredder here.
But I don't want to conquer this place. I want to conquer Earth.
I think this is the only time in the first 5 episodes that we get a hint at Shredder's whiny personality that would become somewhat more prevalent as the series continued. Also, what makes me scratch my head is that Krang is happy to be back in Dimension X. So when the portal was created and the neutrinos came through, why did he not just venture back to his homeworld then? I mean, it may be because of the deal he has in place with Shredder, or that he didn't want his hordes of warriors to see him as a bodiless brain. Now, that actually reminds me, I do remember that episode in one of the later series in which we see what Krang and his species look like with bodies. Pretty terrifying and creepy too. It's kind of funny, these little TV interviews. This would become real life when the Turtles craze went worldwide. The cartoon was kind of predicting the future. News reports would cover the franchise with kids loving it and older people deriding it as being bad for children. Crazy. It's crazy to think that this miniseries is 36 years old now. But what an episode though. Can you imagine back in 1987 being a kid, heck a teenager, hell anyone, watching this show for the first time, seeing this culmination of the first season, these first 5 episodes reach a conclusion. It must have been a great feeling because you could only imagine all the wonderful adventures that lay ahead. Sadly, as I mentioned, in the UK, the first episode we saw was Return of the Shredder, which was still a good start because the very strength of the Ninja Turtles concept is what has carried it for decades. But yeah, if you ever want to show people the best version of the animated Ninja Turtles, definitely head for the first 5 episodes, especially this episode, because it is just absolutely fantastic. And that's the end of this commentary. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the very next one.